Everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and this is my first review in who knows how long. Haven't done anything in forever, but Star Wars is back, and so reviews are back. Obviously, we were doing the first 3 episodes of Andor. They were great, simply put, just to start off with like really, really good. It does suck that we're not getting 3 episode chunks because it's very clear that that's how they're going to be doing the show. I think it was even said by Tony Gilroy or Tony Gilbert, the Tony that is doing the show, that the series is going to be done in arcs, and it was very clear how they set it up. Where like this was the first arc as far as the introduction to. Well, I can't really say introduction, but introduction to I guess this version of Andor. Not obviously not Andor as a character. Also, do they give out awards just for titles? Because I was like, that was the hypest title card opening I've ever seen. I know people love Daredevil. I always thought Daredevil looked really cool and stuff, but I was just like, this is the sweetest opening I've ever seen for a show. Like, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, especially because it's Star Wars. When it first started off, I was confused. I'm like, well, normally they do like, the usual stuff and title call and things like that. And it was just space. And I was like, okay, so it's starting like one of the movies. And then it just kept sitting there. And I'm like, what is going on right now? I was so confused. And then it's just this music kicks in and it's just the title. I was like, that was insane. So I really enjoyed that. Admittedly, I was also high when I watched all 3 episodes. But that doesn't change the fact that I still think they were really good. Because if I was bored, I would have been extra bored. But I really love the title card because I was just like, wow, that's an amazing way to start off a show, like to get you hype. If every episode, I would assume every episode is going to start that way rather than doing, something beforehand and then it switches. I think for one, it's a long opening because of how long it pauses on just the planet and then builds into the text. I think every episode is specifically going to be like, this is the title, this is how it starts, and then the episode happens, because they can't do like, Boba Fett, Mandalorian, where it's like, here's the thing, and like, here's, like the opening set piece for the episode, and then boom, the effects kick in, and here's the title and the song, because those just kind of, they flash on screen, you get a couple of seconds, and it's like 10 seconds, or it's like less than that, it's like 5 seconds long, and then it's like, all right, we fade out, and we keep the music going, and the music dies down, and you're in the show. This was like, it felt like I was sitting there for a minute. Once again, I was high, but it was a decently long intro, and I felt it was like, honestly, it was clearly meant to be truly epic. And I feel like if you do something before that, I don't know, maybe you would just you could do it, but it just seems so crazy. It seems like such the perfect way to open it, where it's epic but also very calm. So either way, had to throw that in there. I was like, I couldn't believe how much I actually enjoyed the title card. So that was really cool. But the episodes themselves were definitely fun. The way that they do the flashbacks, as far as him, losing his sister and like his people, kind of experiencing, I guess apparently it was a separatist ship. It wasn't an imperial ship. So, which makes sense considering the time. But the way they handled it, I thought was very interesting. I was like, okay, so these are his people, and you realize like the whole tribe is like teenager and below. And I was like, that's weird. Like, where are all the parents and stuff? And they actually reference it later, although it took me a second to actually like put 2 and 2 together. I didn't even think about it until I actually started watching reviews. And all the parents died in that crazy mining thing where they were like, oh, they abandoned the whole planet. There was some accident. All the adults go to work. All the kids stay behind and take care of each other in the village. Something happened where it just, whatever went down, and everybody died. Like, all the adults in that area were killed in this accident. And so the Empire abandoned the planet back when they were whatever they were. And it was like, oh, that is very interesting. So it took me a minute to put that together, but I thought that was a cool way to show why it's all these kids, because I was like, that's very confusing. Like, it doesn't, like, how is it just, it's not like, oh, their tribe is made of children. It's like, well, that just doesn't, like, did they leave, or what happened? All the adults just died. Everybody's dead. So that was crazy. I thought that was a cool way to do that. Like I said, I don't think that was tied together too well, because they reference that. I think they show it in the first episode, if I'm not mistaken, when he walks past like just the big crater, but they don't mention it until episode 3. And that was in the same night. And I didn't put that together until watching reviews later. Like, oh, that's why he stared at the thing. And it wasn't, I thought at first it was like he'd never seen that before, and it was just this crazy moment. It was like, no, he knew about that. It was just, they don't typically have space travel and stuff like that, which explains why they had those outfits. Cause I'm like, the one girl's outfit, obviously it looked like, a rebel outfit, but it was like the materials specifically seem, that way. So it made sense. They did have that technology there before, but it wasn't, the Empire kind of abandoned after that crazy accident. So everything was, with everything being left behind, they didn't really keep that tech, but they did experience it. It wasn't the first time they'd ever seen the ship, which I think everyone thought in the beginning of the episode, or at least the beginning of that flashback. but that's not what it was. It was just the first time they saw one in quite a while. And it's like, the last time this happened, all our parents died, and that sucks. But Andor is looking for his sister in the beginning. He comes across some rent-a-cops. They hassle him. He kills them, kills one dude, and then it's like, and they're both in the same situation. Like, oh, he's dead. You have the gun. You killed him, and I'm here with no gun. And then when he tried, he went through the whole thing. We'll go together. He fell. It's like, can't, and he blew his brains out. Or I guess he soldered them, really. But either way, he killed 2 people, and then he takes off. And it was like, oh, this wasn't as epic for him as it was when he was in Rogue One, where it was like he had to do something, and it was like, oh, this guy's a piece of trash, or he just killed a guy he didn't have to kill, but it was just in case. And it was like, boom, and he killed him, no problem. This was clearly like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, and I need to go. So I really enjoyed the way they kind of set up the intrigue of this is just a man on the run, because honestly, I assumed he was in the rebellion when it first started. Like, not the rebellion itself, but when this series was going to start, I figured the first thing was going to be he's already on a mission, which is what I thought he was doing. And then it was like, I'm looking for my sister. I was like, oh, I thought for sure this was going to be, we start right up, he's in the rebellion already and he's doing a mission, because that's how it felt like. But that's just his character. He's always been that way. He literally explains it in episode 3, like, how could you have possibly gotten this? It's literally sealed. And it's like, I just walked in. I beat up a guard at one point, and then put on some boots, I put on a hat, and I just walked in and I took it. So I was like, this is just the character he's always been. So the way they handled that was very interesting. Like, he's definitely got skills, but he definitely F's up. I think it was also in the first episode where like 3 different people were like, hey, remember that money you owe me? And it's like, I do. So he owes a bunch of people. He owes a bunch of people money. He's already used up all his favors, but he's trying to cash in like the last couple that he really has. And I like the way that was handled. I thought it was a pretty decent job with this character being capable, but still kind of a screw up, because that's just the scoundrel lifestyle really in Star Wars. But I like the way it was handled. I like the side characters. Apparently his mom, I didn't realize this to another review, his mom, the actress for that actress is the aunt from Harry Potter. That blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, that is her. So that's crazy. Much cooler in this, because I hated her in Harry Potter, but she's cool in this. She's really sweet. I love the droid. I was like, I've never seen that design. I thought that was cool. He cares about Andor. It's like his brother, and he's just like, you should stay. Like, I was just like, oh, that's kind of sad. It's just like his brother just really cares about him. So I thought that was really interesting. I was like, they've never had that sort of relationship, and it's like, that's cool, but also really sad, because he was just like, you should stay. I was like, ooh, emotional. But I really loved him. I loved the opening sequence where he's going through. I assumed that he was like the town alarm system at first, because it was just a droid going through. I thought they were just kind of showing the world, which they sort of were, but it was very specific. But loved the droid, loved his mom. Crazy how excuse me, she ended up becoming his mom, where she basically kidnaps him at the end, but it's like, we can't just let him go back to his people, because they're all going to get wiped out when the Empire shows up. So I was like, ooh, that's tough. And he never saw his sister again. I'm sure obviously they don't show the language. Even if you put subtitles on, it just says speaking Canarian, I believe was the name of the planet. I assume that what he said at the end was the classic, I'll be back later. And he wasn't. And I assume that that's what it was, because that was the classic shot of I'll be back. And then they just do the long hold on the lonely kid. It's like, and he never saw her again. So that'll certainly be interesting how they end up kind of playing around with that storyline. If he finds his sister, what happened to his sister? Simple guess, as young as she was, she's probably in the Empire. I think that would be the coolest thing ever. It would be so effed up, but I think that would be a great plot line if they revealed that she's actually a part of the Empire, and then maybe she ends up hunting him down. That would also be really cool. But love the way they handled the characters, both main characters, side characters. They even did the quick revenge, where they're like, look, we're leaving the planet anyway. We know everybody hates Tim. Boom, he's dead. It sucks for Tim. He was like, Andor's always effing something up. He's always hurting your feelings. And, it seemed like they were getting together. So it was part jealousy, part actually caring about her. But hey, if I hate you, I hate you. And that's just how it is. Like, we already know Andor becomes the hero. So it's like, sorry, Tim, you just a snitch. And he died. And hey, he was trying to care, but you don't know the overall story. And plus he's dead now. So it is what it is. He's gone and we fly off planet. But I love the show so far. I love the way they handled the flashbacks. The ending, I think it was in episode 3, it was like the first time they did a cut where you didn't realize it was in the flashback until something else happened. And I was like, oh, especially while high, I was very confused for a second. And then I was like, oh, they did like the trick transition and you didn't realize it. And they didn't do that for the first 2. So that really caught me off guard for episode 3. but it was really well done, especially at the end. And they also don't show them go into hyperspace, which I thought was interesting. And maybe it's because they wouldn't have been able to cut back between the two. So instead of, well, they could have technically, but it would have been exactly the same instead of this emotional moment of like, here's the kid looking out into space and then, or, looking up at the sky. And then here's the adult version of him doing that. And then it ends on, hyperspace. And it's like, it's not as dramatic to cut through two versions of him going through hyperspace. So I think that's why they cut it before they actually shoot off into light speed. So I was like, that's actually a cool decision. I assume it's intentional because that seems like the design of this whole show seems very intentional. And I imagine when I was watching it, that was why they ended up ending it that way instead of them actually shooting off and it ends. It's just like, you don't even know what's coming next, even though we would assume hyperspeed. You just don't know what comes next. So love the way they handled it from beginning to end. I like the action. I hate the cops already. The rent-a-cop extra, main rent-a-cop guy. I think depending on how things go, because there's supposed to be a time skip between seasons. I mean, obviously, and also them starting off with BBY5 was like the coolest thing in the world to me. I was like, wow, we've never had it where it meant anything to say battle before Yavin. And it just really gives you like this very exact space. I mean, literally tells you 5 years before, but it gives you such an exact space on what the universe is dealing with, where it's like, this is 5 years before people comprehended like the real concept of being free from the Empire, like an actual blow to the Empire that truly signifies there might actually be freedom for all of us in the galaxy. And it was like, that's an interesting way to do it, where it's just like, this is really serious. This is 5 years before like one of the largest moments in galactic history. So I love that. For some reason, it was just, once it started, I was just like, that makes it instantly feel more intense. So I'm excited about that, but I know they're doing a time skip at some point. I assume the villain, the main guy from this episode, he will end up being in the Empire. It's almost guaranteed. Like, I have my guess with the sister. It's almost guaranteed with that guy. Like, he hates Andor, and he effed up really, really bad. He screwed up at the speech. He didn't listen to his boss. He got like 5 different people killed. Like, he's really going to be effed up. He's going to be sent somewhere, and somehow everything will work out. He'll be with the Empire, just, being really mean. So I thought that was interesting, and we'll see what happens. I feel like the way they're doing his character, that's another thing with the time skip, or maybe we'll see it in this season as well. Who knows? They might even time skip throughout this season, actually. So depending on how his character goes, we might actually get to see his progression from, the sector he's in to actually being a part of the Empire. And we might just see him actually become the leader that he's clearly not. Like, he has the concepts and the ideas, but he doesn't have the practice. He hasn't been in the field really. He was eager to do it, but he can't give a speech. He can't, like, it's just not him. He was the one who got, walked up on. So it's kind of like, oh, that's really bad on you. It wasn't like one of the other people, even though, of course, like, other people ended up dying. I mean, one dude literally just couldn't figure out how to fly a ship real fast, which I thought was funny. I was like, normally when that happens, it's super quick. And I thought it was going to be a thing where he has to like go back down or something. He just kept flying. Like, he just went higher and higher. I'm like, I don't know if I would have kept doing that. Like, typically if something doesn't move exactly the way you want it to, and it's like, ooh, I'm moving like something just hit me, and all I did was take off, I'd probably be like, let me drop it down real fast and just check some things out. And he just kept flying. I was like, that was very like Stormtrooper-esque to me, because it made no sense. I was like, why in the world would you keep flying the way that he was flying? Because he wasn't already in the air and then something happened and he couldn't control it. He was struggling and like trying to push the thing up. It's like, well, clearly if you need more force, obviously this, like, you're heavy. Like, that should almost be basic. I know that, and that's just from like planes. Like we have real life situations for that. And it's like, you didn't think about that, and you kept trying to fly. I thought it was super weird personally, because I just thought it lasted so much longer than it needed to, when it was just like, wouldn't you, literally, he has training to fly it, wouldn't the first thing you do just be like, whoa, let me kind of correct this? Because he was actually fairly stable. All it did was like just jerk him like something was on the back with a chain, which it was. And that was all it did. Like, he was like, whoa, that's weird. And then he was just forcing it, trying to like shoot super high up with like all the power he could in the engines. I'm just like, wouldn't you just slow down and be like, that's weird. What's going on? Let me check my sensors. Let me just float here for a second, check some things. I don't know what's happening. It keeps happening. Let me drop down just to see what's going on here. That's it. But he was just like, no, I literally just went up and this was a terrible situation. Let me make it worse. And then he just died. Like, the thing got caught and it looped him around, and he was just like, He's gone. And I was like, I feel like that could have been avoided like 15 seconds ago, but fine by me. Fine by me. So it'll be interesting to see how the main villain continues to advance and become a better villain going, further into the series. And maybe they won't kill him at the end of the season. Maybe he will be there until season 2. That would be pretty cool. Depending on, everyone kind of assumes that it's because it's supposedly right up until pretty much the events of Rogue One. So that could literally be like the last bit of the final episode of season 2. It could be him going to that very mission where he meets the person and kills him, and then it's like perfect transition into Rogue One. And that would kind of be cool, considering what they did at the end of Rogue One. It'd be like, it's a cool way to kind of keep that through line going of how they kind of do the teasers, literally going into the very next scene. So who knows what we'll get going forward, but I really enjoyed these first 3 episodes. I'm actually happy that they did it this way. I mean, they had to, because they delayed it so long. They were like, hey, first 3 episodes. But also, that was another thing. I think it'll be fine going forward, but the 3 arc thing also, I think, really, really helped the first 2 episodes, because I'm sure we're going to get more of the flashbacks, but there'll be different flashbacks now because he's off planet. So we'll get to see more of him with his mom. And I would assume his dad was the guy that was also there. I would assume that they were an actual couple, and whatever went down, he ended up dying at some point, especially considering Andor actually has his gun. Like during the flashback when he pulls out what I call the little stubby, because I've been playing Days Gone recently, and that's a sawed-off shotgun. He pulled that gun out, and I was like, oh, Andor has his gun. So that, I assume, was his dad. And I'm sure that's going to be a big story where it's like the Empire hung him in a town square at some point. So that's going to be a flashback, I have to imagine. If not this season, the next season. But I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I'm excited to see more of the flashbacks. But it was definitely like with the first 3, they were slow enough. And the way they were doing it, I was like, I wish we got more of the flashback faster, considering how it was so paced out. Because I was like, I just want to get to the end, obviously, of the flashbacks. But I was invested of every single scene during the present sequence, but the flashback, for some reason, I felt moved a little too slow for the first 2 episodes. Like I know everything, everything, once again, 3-story arc, everything built, in episode 3, but I was just like, the flashbacks needed to just be like a little bit faster on like the intriguing part, I think is the best way to put it. I think the whole first episode led up to him leaving. And even then, I think it took until like close to the end of the second episode before he even went into the ship. So I was like, okay, there's obviously some intrigue there when they're walking across the bodies and stuff. But I was like, I want to see the end of what happens here, or how far this is really about to go. And, of course it concluded. So I think the next set of flashbacks will probably be him older. And I think those will be more exciting episode per episode. But definitely the first one was like, oh, this is important. It's his sister's, the relationship, the final day, stuff like that. But it was also kind of just like, okay, this feels slow, but it's not as intriguing as the modern day stuff, because I already know that it's just going to be like, okay, something happened. And then that was like, the bad thing's going to happen. And I immediately just kind of want to see the bad thing. And I think the fact that you don't actually know what they're saying probably added to that for me. Because it was like, if I was actually reading exactly what they were saying, like obviously you can just tell, like it's like, oh hey, don't do this or whatever, I'll be back, sort of thing like that. I almost feel like, though, if I knew exactly what they were saying, I would have been a little bit more attached to it, because it's a decent set of flashbacks. And technically speaking, until you get to the final flashback where he gets taken from the planet, you don't actually know what anyone's saying. Everybody's just saying stuff, and it's really just like you're just watching. Like it's cool the way they did it, but at the same time, I feel like that was another thing that kind of keep the flashbacks from really tying me down as far as interest. Still intrigued, but not nearly as much. And it was just like, I think if I knew, even if it was just basic stuff, like, this is why we're putting on the paint, or whatever, whatever she was saying, I feel like I would have been a little bit more attached. Like, of course, you watch it and through context what's happening, but at the same time, you're still not as tied down to it when you don't know the exact wording even used. Like, that can make a huge difference too. So even though we got, of course, the impact of everything from beginning to end for the flashbacks, I do believe them not actually subtitling it did take away for me, because it was like, these are decently long sequences, and it's just like, all right, basic context clues from years and years worth of other TV and movies and other stories where we've seen this thing happen over and over again. It's a tribe, this crazy thing happened, we got to investigate, see what happened. We get the whole gist of it. He wanted to be more adult, so he left his little sister behind, and things kind of fell apart from there, and that's how he lost his sister. But I feel like having exact words would have added like just a little bit for me, but still absolutely love the show. I think it's really good for the first 3 episodes. Looking forward to the next, was it 12 episodes total? So I would assume next 9 or either 6 or 9 episodes. Um, Either way, I think it's going to be good. I'm definitely looking forward to jumping into just the absolute madness of doing the missions. There's so many scenes from the trailer that are coming up. I think pretty much everything from the trailer, aside from like maybe 2 shots, was from everything after these 3 episodes. So I'm like, all right, I'm ready to see all sorts of wild stuff going down. So I'm looking forward to this show. I would love to know your thoughts on these first 3 episodes, where you think we're headed, where you don't think we're headed. Do you think we'll get some cameos? I know Saw Gerrera is supposed to be in this. Mon Mothma is in this, so we'll see if anybody else pops up. They could have whoever they want, but we'll see what happens. We'd love to know your thoughts, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.